Okay, welcome to Watercolor Studio 42, and today I'm going to do a little bit of talking about how I kind of get started here. A lot of people say, well, how do you get some movement into your paintings? Well, always consider that somewhere along the line you've got to get some diagonal movement in your picture, diagonals, because those are lines that move. You do verticals up and down, that's all they do is up and down, just like an elevator, and if it's flat across, it's just like a train on the tracks. You're just going back and forth. So what I try to do is always find a way of utilizing the diagonals. And one way of doing it is doing pictures like of a road scene, a country road that kind of winds up. Again, you're talking about that diagonal movement. And then sometimes it could be a river or like a waterfall. Today I'm going to be trying to do a waterfall, the way the water will cast down. But it isn't going to be coming down straight. It was kind of, the picture's going to be on an angle. And you'll see what I'm trying to do with it. And what I try to do also is indicate like stepping stones, where I should shade it darker. So it's like stepping stones, so you're moving up on that diagonal. You're moving up on that diagonal. I could show you, I'm going to just put a little light arrow in there. See how I'm going up and down through here? Now, also another trick of the trade is to try to get the trees not to lean out of your picture, but you notice I have them kind of leaning into the picture, it kind of locks it in a little bit. And another thing what I try to do, when I do the shapes of rocks and whatnot, I try to vary the shapes so that you're dealing with large rocks and medium-sized rocks and smaller rocks and pebbles and so forth, so that you're always getting a variety of things that make the painting, in my opinion, a little bit more interesting to look at. So the idea is to capture, to move, to get some movement going. And you can see in this picture, I'm dealing with my famous Z, my Z shape quite often. And another shape I like to do too, if I'm doing a floral picture, is a lot of times using S, that S shape, the curve. So when you do the flowers, the placement of the flowers, flowers, it's climbing up that S shape. So again, you're getting that movement. What I try to avoid is stacking, putting one thing on top of the other. You don't want to try to avoid that. I call that grocery store syndrome. You know how they stack the cans on the shelves, one on top of the other. So I always have some term for something. So today, this is what we're going to be doing. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to outline a lot of the shapes just using my marker. Now, if you use anything other than just straight watercolors, you have to call it a mixed media painting. So I am using these permanent markers. I use them quite often, Sharpies or whatever brand you could find. And then, but make sure if you're going to paint with water, you got to make sure the permanent markers, otherwise you're going to smudge. So now, when I do this sometimes, looking down at my paper, I've kind of outlined a little bit of this, but what I can do is go over and I vary the thickness of that line. See how I can make it wider on one side? You want to kind of do it slow at first until you get used to kind of controlling it on the edge. See how you can make that side wider. So that side of the tree is somewhat, we'll say, in the shade, in the shadow. The light source, I usually put some marks on, little arrows on the edge of the tape so that you can kind of remember where the light source is coming from. A lot of times I forget that, caught up in the doing something else. Now, here, you can also do a little bit more outlining here. See how I can make this contour of the rock show up a little bit more? Let's see, where I put some benchmarks in here where some of this could be colored in a little bit darker. I could fill that in here, you know, like that. Maybe along this a little bit more down into here. And so that just gives you some variation of the line thickness. A lot of times I use a ruler. I do the whole picture with just straight edges. A lot of times you probably have seen some of my work that I've had on before, where I just do everything with a straight edge. Today I'm just kind of drawing this freehand, so of course it's going to have some curves in it. See how I'm just outlining the contour, cutting in a little bit here and there. Even all these little wedges that you make, you want to make them kind of look interesting when you're working. Let's put this in over here, a little bit more shadow also on this rock. You have to keep remembering where the light source is coming from to keep it consistent. Okay, so now if I'm doing a painting that's outside, I guess I've always mentioned this before, but I sound like a broken record repeating myself. But for the first time, if you're watching the show, I always start from the top and work my way down. I do the sky, and while I'm letting the sky dry, I'm doing something in the foreground. And then I usually end up doing the middle part. And probably the detail, you know, if it's bushes or flowers or filling in the trunk of a tree, that's usually the last thing that I fill in with color. Now, for a person that draws well, this isn't a bad style to have, because you're drawing, and once you get a nice drawing, you know, your composition, everything's set up. It's just a matter of now putting the color in, like you would a coloring book with crayon or markers or whatever you're using. And it's just a matter of filling it in, like you would a coloring book. So it's an easier way for people that don't like to just start in painting. You know, that's a little bit tricky. But you can do your drawing and then go over that with your marker and then paint. Okay, now, having said all of that, I always start with a bigger brush. Like I said, this is outdoors, so I'm going to start with the sky first. You don't have to be too fussy with that. Sometimes by the time you put the leaves on the tree, you don't see too much of the sky. So something like that. There you go. All right. Fill that right in. Like I said, you don't have to be too fussy. I just like to wet the paper. A lot of times you have to go back and re-wet the paper if you haven't got to it soon enough. If you're painting outside, I usually wet both sides of the paper before I even start, because if it's a real hot, dry day and breezy, everything dries too quick, especially for watercolor anyways. So here you go, something like that. And as I've mentioned before, I don't do too much of a completed finished drawing, because if I spend too much time with a pencil, then I'm getting too fussy when I try to paint it. You know, I'm trying to paint around all these little objects and shapes and so forth. So I just do a kind of a preliminary sketch like you can see here. Now, probably today is good because I think on television, my drawing, because I've outlined it more or less with a marker, is going to show up a little bit more, maybe quite a bit more, my sketch. Okay, so that's not a bad idea. Okay, now starting with the sky, let's take a little bit of, we'll take phthalo blue. I like that particular shade of blue. And we're just going to put some sky in there. Now the sky, you don't want to make it too dark, because it kind of gets a little bit on the heavy side. Now if I go over, if I'm painting into the tree, it doesn't matter, because the trees are going to be a little darker than the sky. See how you just fill that in? You want to put a little bit of that reflection down here. Now, also while you're using the blue, this is going to be, today, it's going to be a little bit of like a waterfall that cascades down through here. sometimes I don't have too much luck with getting the effect of the water, if you will. You have to spend some time on that. And down around the base here, you have to kind of make it look lighter because it kind of foams up a little bit, aerates, and then it's running off either to the left or right or straight ahead. We'll have it going off this way, across the bottom. That just reminds me, a little bit about saving some of the white of the paper. Because all this water, when it's cascading over the rocks, it's going to be aerated, so it's not going to have too much color in it. You want it to be the color of the paper. And if you want to make it look like it's kind of bubbly and foaming up and like a spray, I just hit the edges before the edges can dry. See how you can soften that down? And I can always come back and add as much blue into it as I'd like. But that can be just a little bit of a spray coming up from that. Now, as I mentioned before, if you do the pencil sketch, go over it with pen and ink, where you want it to be shaded, if you will, then it's very easy. It's just like, now it's like a coloring book, okay? But, of course, if I say that, people say, my gosh, they think of it of something else. They say, well, that sounds too easy, doesn't it? And of course, your painting can get into fussy work. My gosh, you could show every fur piece on a dog or cat or whatever, but I don't get that fussy with it. Okay. Okay. Now I've got that sky up there. I'm just going to let that dry. If it has a few puddles, I just brush the puddles off with my towel onto the tape there, onto the edge. So now, let's see what we can do. We're going to come down here. We're going to start putting in some ground. And I'm going to start off, I'm going to make some of the rocks down here. And I'm going to use a little bit of my sepia, which is kind of a deeper, a very, very deep shade of brown. And I'm just going to make this look like paint some of the rocks down here in the foreground. I leave sometimes a little bit of paper showing through. You can blot it too. Just adds a little bit of a highlight texture. See how you can work that in? So now let's do a little bit more. I'll get a little darker down. Where everything's out of the light, you can always paint, shadows darker. The light's coming this way. Well, if the rock's curved, you don't see so much of the shadow side, just like in the back of this rock here. See how that can be filled in. Now, it seems that a lot of times with watercolor, you can leave a lot of little white specks, or they call them windows. You can leave some of that in. See how you can blot it and texture it before the paint dries, like this, something like that, and whatnot. Now, as far as the trees go, we're going to have some light. There's going to be a light side of the tree with light's coming in from left to right. So this side of the tree, I'm going to give it a little dash of my yellow mixed in with raw sienna, and so it's kind of a off color, has a little bit of light to it. I'm going to bring that right over. Let's fill the whole thing in, the whole tree in. We can always go darker if we have to. I think I have a tendency sometimes to paint too light, and then I have to work some dark into it later on. And sometimes we don't have time to really finish the painting as far as putting some of the color in and some of the texture too. I have what I have trouble sometimes is I'll do the trunk of the tree and everything else, and then I really don't end up with enough time to put some branches on the tree. See, now this is more of a, I'm getting it into more of a darker brown. Use my sepia with raw sienna, and you can get into some darker shades here. But you can see how it's easier to color. It's easier to paint it in because it is like a coloring book. Yeah, just dash something up into here. Sometimes I just drop color and I can always put something on top of it. Let's fill this in down here a bit. A little bit of background there. Don't have to get too fussy with it just yet. Yeah. And you notice I usually I'll have a paper towel in one hand and brush in the other, of course, because that makes it handy. I don't have to keep reaching for a towel. I've already got to see. Now I can keep working a darker shade on those trees. Let's fill this in. Okay. I have in mind to make that much deeper down in here. Let's see if I can get away with that. Oh, well, it's not bad. But the only trouble is if I go too dark, then I'm losing some of the real dark on the shadow of the tree. So sometimes I have to go back and lift some of that out. As long as a lot of times you can catch something before it can dry in and lift it out with a paper towel, lighten it up a bit. Yeah, and you can use your brush almost like a sponge, take some of that color back out. There you go. A little bit over here. So now I tend to do mostly floral paintings and landscapes, seascapes a lot of times. And of course my favorite, I'm into birch trees quite a bit. I do birch trees. I like waterfalls too, like the state parks and national parks and stuff with waterfalls. Yosemite, that's one of my favorite places. Okay, here you go. Where I get some of my pictures, oh my gosh, all the time they're sending calendars from everybody. You get a calendar in the mail. And usually I go through it and the months, and usually you'll find probably at least 2 or 3 months that potentially, in my opinion, good ideas for paintings. The composition isn't too bad, the colors are pretty good, and a variety of texture and so forth. So I kind of look for that type of thing. Sometimes the subjects will strike me, some of the things. I guess I have to be more or less inspired a lot of times. I like cute little pictures, puppy dogs and things like that. I don't do portraits. I guess I've mentioned that before. I kind of stay away from doing portraits. I can do faces, a generic face, the proportions and everything, but I have trouble with getting the likeness to the person a lot of times. I do a little caricatures. I can get away with those a little bit better than trying to get too serious with a portrait, There's some people that are fantastic with portraits, and they specialize in portraits. Okay, I'm just kind of fooling around with that background. Now, I always try to put in some base colors. Now, even if you're just doing a coloring a book with crayons or colored pencils or something, always work some sort of a base color in. Usually it's lighter, like yellow, and then they put the blue on top, and then the green for grass. But don't use a straight, just don't use just straight green to color in. Put some other shade in it, and those are the underlying colors that kind of, especially with watercolor, you want those colors to kind of come through in different places. And try to consider repeating your colors in more than one place, like, in the trees, the ground. It says, I have this color here, put some over here, put some up in there. Kind of distribution of color. And that has a lot to do with pulling your painting together. It unifies your paintings more or less that way. Okay. There's all little subtle things that you can do, and people say, well, how did he or she get that particular effect? And sometimes it looks amazing, and sometimes it's just easy. Sometimes it's just letting a drop of water in there and let it do its thing. Maybe it dries out, like they call like happy accidents, I guess. The way it falls. Okay, see how I'm getting some of that color in there? I'm going to put a little bit over here, it doesn't hurt. A little bit more there. You can even put it up on the tree if you want. Just kind of get that color mixed around. So some of the things I'm talking about today, really starting off with getting the idea of using diagonals for movement in your painting, variety of size, texture, color, repeating your colors. All these things are just basic things that you have to consider when you paint. Now, usually, if you paint enough, you don't even have to start thinking about it. Oh, what do I do here or there? No, automatically you know that you're going to repeat the color, or you're going to do this or that. Now this is a water stain there. It's on the bark of the tree. If it looks okay, I leave it. So I do that a lot with my birch trees because they have all sorts of little defects in texture, all that change. Yeah, let's do something else here. Just break this up out here. I don't know. Sometimes, you drop something on the paper, and because you're not really trying to be too fussy, for some reason it comes out better because it's more relaxed. You let the paint do itself, kind of work itself in. See how I'm kind of building up little textures. Now, this is up to you how much you want to do with this. You can put little flowers in there. You can have weeds and things growing. But what I usually have to do, you probably should consider doing, don't try to put all that little fussy stuff in while the paper is still wet, because obviously it's going to blur. See all these little puddles? You try to put any fine lines in that. That's all going to get blurry, so forth. Now, we got to get some water cascading. Now, the water, generally really speaking, falls from up here down, from the top to the bottom, and they tell us in the art world, well, you don't have to do that. I'll take a smaller brush here. You can take and have the water kind of. If you want to put some color into the water, you can have it push it up a little bit. So you can start from the bottom. See, I'm going to take some. I want to make sure I get blue into this water a little bit, even though it's aerated. It looks whiter. Rather than make it look too brownish, or I should say, too dark. A little bit of Payne's gray, maybe. But not much. We still want to maintain some blue into that. So in places where you want to get some shadow in there, you can put, if you're going to do that, make it soft. So you just put it on the edges. And I guess you need some color there because you want to show some contrast. When if it bubbles up down here, sort of like a spray, well, you got to put something into that to make it look like a contrast where the spray is, the white of the paper. And I'm going to take a cleaner towel here. Now I'm wetting the edges because I want that to be softer. See, I did that a little bit before. You can always make it softer. That's already drying. The only way to lighten that up now, if I didn't want that to be too solid, I could come in and re-wet the paper and then blot it and take some of the paint out. But another thing I do is I leave it that shade, but watch this. If I come in with a little deeper shade of blue, I need a little bit more than that. Let's see. You come in with a little darker shadow, and see how that makes the that light blue look lighter with a darker color against it, something like that. I can finish off down in here too, while I'm holding a brush with some blue on it. Okay, just fill this in here a little bit more. Now I can make that much darker. Oh my gosh, let's put some Payne's Gray into this blue we have. Watch this. This gets a lot darker down through here. You want to make it a little darker at the base of your painting. It gives it a little bit more foundation when you're working. So now this is just a matter of letting a few things dry. And I can certainly come back in with a marker and add a little bit more details. Those branches that I was talking about, have some of those come out. Now look, the sky's not quite dry, so I had a little bit of trouble trying to get the marker to work. So I'm going to let that set a bit longer and let it dry before I start trying to do too much with that. Okay. Now, whatever you want to put it off in the distance, I suppose we could put maybe some trees, maybe pine trees or fir trees or whatever. Let's just introduce some green into that background. And a little bit there. Whoops. I suppose that could be reflection on the water, so I don't have to worry too much about that. But see if I can thin this line out. I come back in and work the marker. You can put more color into this. And later on I'll do some bushes and things, but right now it's not dry enough. Now that's pretty dark up in there. So what I do is kind of counterbalance this with this over here. Make that a little bit darker. So that's how that works. See you counterbalance one area to the other. Let's get this a little bit darker in here. Maybe. I don't want to get too dark, but I still want to see the contour of the tree. But see how that can counterbalance. So you're always thinking about some other area that you can work some of the color into. This kind of got a little bit carried away there. That's a problem sometimes you have. If you don't let an area dry, it just kind of goes off up into the sky here. Pull it right down. And take a clean paper towel, blot it, and you can make that disappear. Now I've got some kind of this shade getting into the sky, but you know what I can do? Let's counter that with more blue into the brown. Just makes the sky a little darker there. It's always one thing against another, you know. If you put a particular color somewhere, you have to repeat it somewhere else. As a general rule, let's say I use green up there, and I can come back and let's put a little bit of green into here, or a little bit of green. One, two, three places, 3 areas. Doesn't always have to be 3 areas. It could be 4 or 5, whatever you want to do with it. See how that, you just fill in certain areas. Those hills don't have to be that far away or further away, so they don't have as much strong color. Okay. But you see how this is kind of balancing out, I guess, a little bit. And maybe we might want to do something around the base of the trees. Usually I put a little bit more shadow on them. That's why I didn't fill it in across the bottom, because I usually have something that might be growing, you know, growing around the base of the tree. Something like this. Okay. Now, see, that still doesn't look like a waterfall yet. And so you gotta do something. Make it look like it's falling. Okay. Put some top edge here. Coming off there somewhere. And this is moving. It's going to go over the edge here. So we just add a little texture into this, pull it down. A little bit more there. Cut into here. Drop, drop, drop. And like I mentioned, sometimes you can push up on it too. Have it water. Right, if you want more contrast over here, I can do something more with that. I'm using a flat brush across here, smaller flat. But you're trying to get the effect. That doesn't work as well, you just erase it. And find a clean piece of your towel or use another one and just blot that out if you want. Lighten it up a bit. So this is what we're doing now. You can decide what time of year you want. You know, if you want a fall scene, then when you do the ground, you can put more fall colors, yellow, orange, whatever you want to do with it. Maybe show some more color into it. And I don't know if this is dry enough, but I'm going to add some more branches up in there. It's still a little bit wet to go into it with the marker. That's because I tampered with it a little bit there. Didn't let it dry. Wherever you want to break that up in there, you can. Some of the limbs can be lower. They can come out here. Make them thick as they go towards this connect to the tree there. Maybe you need, now here's, if this is dry enough, you can start putting in some other bushes and things like that. Not quite dry enough yet, but maybe I can stipple some things in. Add some texture. You can put taller grass here. Something like that. It works out pretty good. Now, okay, something on the edge here. All the little fussy detail. This can have something growing up and back here. I don't like that there. It looks kind of funny because it doesn't have enough of the little branches connecting into it. It looks like little spots, so let's see if I can do something with that. Maybe do some more texturing with it. And make it more like some colors in it. Let's see if I can get some color into this. Well, it's not bad, but you know, things like that. Yeah, again, repeat the color somewhere else. I think I'll come back later on and probably do more with that area. This needs a little bit more variation of color here. Put some of that warmer color there. Kind of perk it up a little bit more. Yeah, you're getting into more of a fall season here. Come to think of it, I'm wondering what happened to summer. Boy, it seems like summer kind of disappeared pretty fast this year. Already starting September. See that, how that works? Just a little bit of color. And you gotta let the sky dry though, but otherwise it's gonna blur quite a bit. You won't get that effect. Sometimes, you know, what I do is I stipple this with a sponge too. You don't wanna dabble around with a brush to make the texture of leaves. There you go. Okay. Add some color into that. Over here, some color. Repeat those colors. There you go. Maybe something in here. A little bit more down in here. Okay. That looks kind of flat there. So a little bit. We're getting this to look a little bit more like a waterfall, a little cascade. Maybe I need to get that lighter in here. Let's see if I can clean some of that out of this. Get it lighter. And maybe make this edge show up a little bit more. And put a little bit of darker shade of blue on that edge. I don't know if that will help. Push up. Kind of soften it out a little bit more. That's starting to look a little bit more like a waterfall, I guess. I hope. Now this looks like a lot of white here, so maybe we can fill that in with a little darker color. That's a good place to put some of that darker shade here. Whoops, not that dark, but a little bit darker in here. Okay, kind of fill in that area. Makes the tree jump out more. Let's see, around here probably. Kind of clean that up a little bit more. Now you can use, like I said, you can use like a piece of cardboard, like a cut-up credit card, and you can scratch through this to get some of that more of that texture. Once it's hard to get some of the yellow to show up on a darker surface. Okay. This here, I think I better let that dry and then I can come back in a little darker color. Okay, so now we got the waterfall. And to show up the top edge, I'm just going to come up in here and just make that background darker there. And that will make that kind of show up a little bit more coming from off there somewhere. Okay, you can get the idea how that works. Now, there's always some little thing to do. You'll see how this is, you can always cut into this, quiet it down a little bit. Get a little bit of green on the brush here. Let's see if I can get it more of a blue. Something like this, you break that up in through here more. Now with watercolor, after it dries, it's going to dry lighter. It's going to be a lot more lighter than what we have here. Let's make sure I go right to the edge of the tape, because if I don't do that, when I pull the tape off, I'm going to have a sort of a sawtooth edge here, kind of bumpy. So I got to go right to the edge with some color where that tape is. Right up through here, get a little bit more contrast. See where it's light? Let's fill that in darker. Like that. That's light over here. I could make the sky itself darker too in there. But when you do that, you can't leave it that way. You have to kind of pull that back out or blot it. And sometimes you can blend it in by blotting it. I've got to do a little bit more to that. I don't want all that busy stuff. I'll make it lighter or darker, more of a solid color. And there's always something else that you can work on. If you don't like that, take it out. Okay. Now, as the tree gets a little bit drier, you can come back in with color. And if you want to add more texture, there's not too much water on the brush. Give it a soft, a soft dry brush effect. You might show a little bit more texture as a bark on the tree. Make that a little deeper here. Okay. Same way on this side. Yeah, bring out a little bit more texture as a bark. Okay. I don't know if that helps or not. When it dries, it will dry lighter anyways. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, so we can fuss with this quite a bit more if you want, and there's always some little touch-up that you want. Get this kind of, you know what, hard edges in there. You want that all soft, so you have to make sure you catch it in a hurry when you blot it. See if I can kind of soften that out. And a little bit better. Whatever. Now, wherever you want to go, depending on how much you want to spend with detail, I could show like the light coming from that direction. You're going to get a little bit of shadow of the trees, maybe falling across the ground, and something like that. You can't show this one because it's off the edge. Well, we can just fill that in a little bit more. Let's add a little, fill this corner and the edges, so it won't be too bumpy when I take the tape off. Okay. There's always, like I said, there's always some little fussy thing that you might want to do. You want this to be a darker shade of green. You can go a little bit darker along the contour here. Whoops, I don't want to get out there too far. Let's kind of pull that out of there. Yeah, okay. Now, after you let it dry, like I said, you can go back in. You can take a thin marker and you just add a little bit more texture. You want to, break up the rock a little bit or show something like that. You can add some more texture into it. You want to fill it in with the grass a little bit more, you can do that. Can't do it while it's too wet, but you can do that. If you get too much highlight in one spot, like right here, just hit that, quiet that down a bit. Put a little bit more edge on here. Okay, see how you can add some texture. You want to put some more growth in here, you can put some more growth around the tree. This here kind of looks kind of funny, but what I do sometimes is just make that look like it's a fir tree. Let's see if I can do that. See all this out here? Well, we'll take some more green. I think I gotta add some more green on my palette here. Oh, that's okay. Well, you could do something break that up. Make it look like bushes in the background. Hide some of it, I kid about it, but sometimes the things that you hide, your painting comes out better. You try to put too much in, sometimes it's not as good. And it doesn't work as well. That's why you don't want to spend too much time initially when you draw the picture. Because you're going to be painting around too much of the little fussy stuff. So you always put in the fussy stuff by painting it in. Let's bring that out to the corner. Stop too short. Let's bring that down here more. How's that? Whatever. Yep, there's always some little fussy thing you can work on. Make that more like a silhouette in there. A little bit more texture around the trees. Okay, it's kind of a big brush to be doing that. Okay, let's kind of quiet this down right in here. Okay, that just gives you an idea what you can do. Now, like I said, this is a type of thing where if the person can draw well, you can kind of sketch a picture out in pencil first, then go over your pencil marks if you want with permanent ink, and then it's like painting in a coloring book or, shading it in and go from there. Sometimes I put a couple of birds off here, wherever, something in the sky. Okay, now you can always go a little bit with the marker. You want to bring up the edge on the waterfall, that little drop there. Okay, now very carefully, I'm always seeing something. Let's see if I can clean that up. Okay, now very carefully you take off the tape And what we've made, we've used the width of the tape to make sort of a false mat around your artwork. And you can make this, the width of this any width you want by doubling the tape around it. You can buy some wider tape. I haven't found too much tape that's beyond 2 inches lately. See how that cleans up that edge? And what else? I think that's kind of, I should do something up in here. See how that stops there? Maybe I can kind of break that up across here. See, that's kind of wet still, so it's hard to have it show up with a marker. Okay, let's finish this up here. And there you have a little bit of a waterfall dropping down. There's always, like I said, there's always some little touch-ups that you can make. Like in here, clean up that, close this in. Sometimes you can do some little bit of a finish work. Okay, there's always some little fussy thing. But you can go too far also a lot of times when you're doing a painting. It gives you an idea. This is a sort of a false mat around it. And then, of course, when you put it in a frame, then the frame is going to make it a little bit larger area. So that's the way that goes. Not too bad. Oh, yeah, I see what I can do. I can give just a little bit more detail to some of these little branches here. Now that it's drier, I can go back and make those show up a little bit more. And you add as many little branches as you want coming out. Whatever you want to do with it. Okay, so that's the way it is. That's the way that is. And like I said, sometimes the less you do, the better it seems to turn out. And we've got a couple of seconds. I'm just going to show you. You can fold this in half, and you can still get two pretty good sized pictures out of this. Almost 11 by 14 by the time you put a mat around it. And you can use a ruler. I have a metal ruler at home that I lay down, and you got to kind of hold it real tight, especially to get the paper started. And then you just tear down the on the edge of the rule. And it doesn't matter if you get a bumpy edge around the outside, because you've got the mat that's going to hide that anyways. Some people just purposely go out of their way to make the edges a little bit bumpier. So you got two paintings there, and then if you want to go a little bit smaller, you can do this. These would be about the size of a 5 by 7. These are probably 8 by 10. Now I'm tearing this manually, but that gets a little bit tricky. That might take a little bit of practice. You don't always get it perfect, but it doesn't matter. Now there's some people that rather than mat their artwork, they mount it. So you take your picture and just put it onto another background, and so that the person that looks at your picture, they see the whole piece of paper. They see the outer edges, and they can take it home and buy a mat for it, clean it up or whatever they like to do with it. So now, just to review this a little bit, remember, when you're starting out, it's sort of like a zigzag. And you can do it either way. You can have it go this way, or you can reverse the Z and have it, go the opposite direction. But the most important thing that you're looking at is to get that diagonal in there. That gives you the movement when you go that route. And and then it's a matter of deciding, oh, I want to put an object here, something there, something up in here, and then you go ahead and you can do your picture. Usually the focal point is they call it the golden section. If you divided your paper up into 9 squares or whatever, rectangles, if you made your paper like that, where these lines bisect here and here, here and here, those are good locations where your focal point could be located. Usually mine's over here, or over on the left side or right side. I usually don't have a focal point too near the bottom of your paper. So you can try it. Now, I think I'm running out of time, so we'll see you probably next week or next time you tune in for the show. And brushes up and have a good week and stay well.